You have entered the 21st century dystopian portal. Welcome to confusion. Welcome to question. And welcome to clarity. The life is in the blood.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the 21 CD podcast. As always, I'm your ghost, John. Listen, if you guys like me on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that little bell icon so you all stay updated. As you can see, I've got a brand new kind of style going on. So we've got to make sure that you're seeing it each time a new drop comes in, because I've got some crazy plans for 2026, and I know I said that in 2025, but man, 2025 hit me like a freight train, and it has been rough, and it's still rough. So we're coming out of it slowly, kind of, but yeah, your support means the world to me. If you are on Spotify, feel free to hit that 5-star, because people like bringing me down, because once in a while I say some stuff that hurts feelings, or I say some weird stuff, but that's just all the name of the game, if you ask me. So support your boy, hit me with that 5-star, those likes and those follows. Let's get to the show. As Hamlet puts it, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. What was describable in the past is essentially indescribable in the present. The past has been eliminated. The present has been completely fabricated. There's only remnants of what once was that sort of peek through the veil. This very special episode comes to be thanks to several incredible authors and spiritual minds, including Adam Oliver Stokes, Rick Renner, Troy Brewer, David Vance, and the legendary Michael Heiser. The ancient people were very aware that there were many different types of beings on the earth before the flood, and even after the flood. Monsters, beasts that were not created by God but that roamed the earth openly, creatures of magnificent proportions, including humanoids, literally ruled the land. In essence, this caused the Great Flood, the deluge. Humanity needed these beings on their side, or so they thought, to survive as a species themselves and to prevail over their enemies, who also had such allies. If you have not yet come to the understanding, and indeed, in my opinion, the undeniable truth that demons and monsters, fallen angels, and false gods are real, and not only in spirit, but also in flesh, then it is time to purify the cup from which you drink, guys. Most religious speakers these days leave out the dialogues from the Old Testament, from the Book of Enoch, the Septuagint. They don't talk about how Israel came to be. And I'm not talking about the bastardization of Israel that lies in the Middle East today, but God's true Israel, his chosen people. And they were challenged in ways that are completely unimaginable to us today. And one of those ways was they were forced to defeat totally a number of races purely defined as giants and demons. All over the world, they are called by various names, but it cements the undeniable truth that these are not merely beings of Christian legend. These are beings that pop up in the majority of ancient tales of any type of magnitude worth speaking of in a spiritual context. They're also remarked on in trivial newspaper clippings from, the late 1800s and the early 1900s in America, and the stories of nearly all Native American tribes. So even relatively new lands appeared to be overrun with these things. And these are irreclaimable creatures once they have chosen to fall, it would seem, not your typical animals. There's nothing in the Bible that indicates these beings can be saved, forgiven, or redeemed. They are not humankind. They're not from the seed of Adam. This is why I believe that whole concept of good Nephilim is an undeniably satanic concept, and quite frankly, a worm that has begun to spread in the minds of people. It is in the same way that superheroes, who are typically also descendants or creations of false gods and humankind, it's the same way they are also encouraged to be imitated and worshipped and enjoyed. They are of the same worm, here to feast on weak minds in order to pave the way for what is to come, as it was in the days of Noah. Again, it will be. So don't find yourself aligning with any Nephilim concept where the Nephilim are the good guys. So all this leads me to the understanding that to truly get a concept of evil, we must realize that these beings know this. They are much more ancient and intelligent than we are. They've also probably seen God. They have chosen a life away from God, and they will pay the price for that, knowing that the price is total annihilation. They have no other recourse but to wage war against God himself in hopes of essentially defeating him and preserving themselves. And they do this through people and things that he loves, us, the earth, and animal kind. According to scholars, when the Hebrews completed their 40 years of wandering through the Sinai desert, they finally arrived in the promised land of Canaan, which was already occupied by a race of fearsome giants, whom we now call the Anakim. The book of Numbers in 13:32 through 33 recounts a story of 12 spies sent on a reconnaissance mission into the Anakim area. And they said, and there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim. And we were in our sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight as well. This term, Nephilim, which you guys are probably very familiar with at this time, and I hope I'm not beating a dead horse here, but new people do arrive, and, the word must be spread. So the Nephilim is one of the most disputed words in the history of biblical scholarship, and they are also known as the Anakim. However, the etymologies are all pretty flimsy, but the wealth of context clues make it quite clear that this was a race of giant warriors who preceded the arrival of the Hebrews into Canaan, very similar to the Native American Anasazi tribal stories from the North American Southwest. In the early Greek interpretations, the word Nephilim was translated as giants, and Zecharia Sitchin is essentially a false prophet. So no, I don't take anything he says about this whole thing into consideration. Just keep that in mind. He wrote science fiction and then tried to essentially turn it into the Bible, but it's not that. Other later translations do include like fallen ones and appointed ones, or overseers, bound ones, prisoners, but the first mention of the Nephilim in the Torah calls them heroes of old and the warriors of renown. Now, apocryphal texts such as the Book of Enoch provide even more clues about the Nephilim or the Anakim people, but these texts are generally regarded by academics as lacking validity, of course, because, not only were they omitted from the official biblical canon, but we allegedly can't find any proof of this in the real world. However, the term apocrypha comes from the Greek roots apo, which means away, and kretine, to hide or conceal. And this would suggest that these books were not omitted due to lack of validity, but rather were deliberately hidden for some other reason, perhaps political or even theological. Some things, it seems, never change. There is strong evidence for the notion that the Carthaginians, the Philistines, and Phoenicians were all offshoot branches of the same original civilization, the Canaanites. It is not disputed that the Phoenician homeland was in the Levant. The ancient Egyptian account suggests that people from Carthage referred to themselves as Kanani or Kinani, which equates to Canaanite. Another complication is that the modern nations beneath which the Canaanite civilizations are buried make archaeological digs pretty challenging. This is like Taliban and ISIS and terrorist territories, okay? Many of the areas have been mired in perpetual conflict. Their borders are all disputed. It's a death zone. There are constant geopolitical hostilities going on, all of which make painstaking excavation pretty much impossible. And also, they sort of deface these locations every chance they get. They're constantly finding artifacts themselves and destroying them. And in my opinion, that could be one of the missions of the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan, was to kind of eliminate some of the traces of this old world. Okay, just one more way that they have essentially tried to reset the narrative. In 2005, despite all of these obstacles, Dr. Aaron Mayer, who was a professor at Bar-Ilan University in Israel and director of an excavation at the ancient city of Gath, discovered actual pottery shards with the name Goliath inscribed on them. The biblical combatant Goliath, as most of us know, was said to be the greatest warrior of the Philistines. He was said to be 8 to 9.5 feet tall, had 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot, and he was known as the Goliath of Gath. And that description sounds uncannily similar to Nephilim, especially the 6 digits, right? Some people are torn. Some people say Goliath was not a Nephilim. Others, definitely think he was. The shard of pottery in question is dated to around 950 BC, which is within 70 years of the alleged biblical existence of Goliath. Of course, this shard does not prove the biblical tale. It does, however, lend a small degree of credence to it, and it's kind of hard to ignore. Many other large polydactyl barbarians are described in biblical books, such as Samuel and Deuteronomy and Chronicles. The Nephilim Anakim family tree included additional lineage branches like the Rephaim and the Zamzamim, and these are figures that include tribes that include figures such as Lami, the brother of Goliath, who was also slain during the conquest and was said to be very large, also with 6 digits on each extremity. Then you have King Og of Bashan, and he is perhaps the most interesting of these Anakim figures because his great size and strength are mentioned in correlation with the structure and an area in the region. In Deuteronomy, it's stated that Og is the last of the Rephaim and that his enormous bedstead, or sarcophagus, was still a sight of wonder for many people at that time. The entire Levant, from Turkey to Egypt, is dotted with field after field of ancient dolmens. In this particular Canaan region, there's also a site known as Rujim el-Hiri, which is connected with the Anakim people. The site has many names, but one modern Hebrew name for this site is Gilgal Rephaim, or the Wheel of the Giant. And I've heard people talk about how this bedstead of Og was some kind of craft. I've heard people say that it was a sort of a bed of sex magic, which is very, very common among these fallen angels and these Nephilim. And the central site, or the central section of this site, I should say, this Wheel of the Giant, matches the dimensions stated in Deuteronomy, but it also shares uncanny similarities to the mysterious structures at Chaco Canyon in North America. So that's pretty weird. Structural resemblance in and of itself isn't usually noteworthy, right? But there is an enigmatic megalith of concentric stone circles that allegedly contains the remains of a very large polydactyl, and that is beyond noteworthy. But of course, anytime these things are found, they are immediately snuffed out. They're turned into dinosaurs. They're turned into some kind of great gigantic species that existed trillions of billions of years ago in a time that is unimaginable, with numbers that are unimaginable, and they're just completely placed outside our realm of imagination scientifically. But there's also a wealth of ancient textual evidence to suggest that the Canaanites, and therefore the Anakim, had Nephilim traits. They practiced human sacrifice and infanticide to an extent that exceeds what has been quote-unquote found in the Bible or chapters removed from the original Bible. Greek and Roman authors all recorded accounts that reinforce the idea that sacrifice and infanticide was common with the Anakim. But for some reason, we just don't continue to talk about these things, these moments from the ancient past. We consider them fable and legend and story, and I think those are all words that have sort of been put into place. They're almost akin to lies most of the time. Authors like Plutarch and Herodotus, for example, attest to this in their writings. But it must be stated that Greece, Rome, and Israel were all competitors of the Canaanites and therefore may not be entirely reliable sources for Anakim accounts. I'm not saying everything I say here today is true, but I am giving you historical accounts. It may seem like a lot of this is spiritual talk, but this kind of plays out more like a history lesson, if you ask me. In 2014, Dr. Josephine Quinn of Oxford University uncovered definitive evidence of infant sacrifice at a variety of Phoenician, Carthaginian, and Canaanite colonies across the Mediterranean, declaring what we are saying now is that the archaeological, literary, and documentary evidence for child sacrifice is overwhelming, and that instead of dismissing it out of hand, we should try and understand it. Her evidence, published in the journal Antiquity, indicates the practice occurred from around 800 BC to 146 BC at a variety of Canaanite colonies in Carthage, Sicily, Sardinia, and Malta. The Malta site is well known for its subterranean sacred spaces and remains exhibiting unique physical traits. And we've talked about this before. I think a 2 or 3 part series on my channel about the giants beneath Malta and how some believe there's still weird stuff going on under Malta. I've been trying to get over there, but life is hard, so I haven't really been there yet, but it's on my list. Of course, it should also be noted that many of this type of evidence that I'm talking about has suspiciously gone missing, and we probably have secret organizations to blame for that. We have governments, we have the Vatican especially, and did I mention the Vatican? We have all of these organizations that attempt to hide these secrets because these secrets are power. Through hiding these things, they can control the narrative. And the narrative is they want it to be the same as the Nephilim and the fallen ones have always wanted it to be. And that's that essentially God doesn't exist. This reminds me much of humanity's obsession with abortion these days, and how we try to dehumanize babies, often up until they're literally born at 9 months, and how mothers these days are obsessed with killing their young, and how, there's rumors of how we use these stem cells and whatnot from fetuses for medical stuff, and how human flesh has been found in McDonald's burgers, and I'm sorry, it brings to mind the conspiracies of adrenochrome and NPCs, the human trafficking elite, not to forget the baby farms of Ukraine and elsewhere, serial killing. Indeed, serial killers are celebrated these days as horrors to bear witness to. So we're starting to see these parallels if you open your eyes to see them, but I don't think most people do, because it becomes a question of their own health. I have to kill for my own health. And that sounds a lot like witchcraft, doesn't it? Sounds like a lot of Nephilim influence to me, fallen angel influence. Weren't these atrocities, these Nephilim, supposed to have been killed off in the flood? I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, those are just things from the past. Those are things from the pre-flood era. But here's where it gets kind of even more interesting, in my opinion. Though the flood account suggests that the giants were exterminated with the rest of the inhabitants of the earth, besides for Noah and his family, they somehow appear again much later in the biblical timeline in what scholars refer to as the Deuteronomic history. In biblical studies, the Deuteronomic history refers to basically the material from Joshua to 2 Kings in the Old Testament. And the history begins with Israel's entry into the Promised Land and ends with the destruction of the southern kingdom, which is Judah, in 586 BC. So within this history is undoubtedly the most famous account of a giant in biblical literature and possibly in Western culture. It's the violent encounter between the Israelite David and the giant Goliath from Gath. And this story is in 1 Samuel 17. It should be noted that in both the Deuteronomic history and in the earlier Yahweh source, the giants are associated with heightened violence, infanticide, and cannibalism. As the Hebrew term lakach suggests, they forcibly they sexually assault the daughters of men, leading to the birth of hybrid superhuman offspring, with extra biblical tradition identifying the Greek gods and heroes as sort of what comes next. Now, it could also be that these gods are fallen angels themselves, Nephilim themselves, not necessarily the descendants of the Nephilim, but these things probably had long lifespans too. We'll get more to that, but it's kind of up in the air, and everybody has their own idea of what all these Greek gods, we just talked about Cernunios and all that. Everybody kind of has their own idea of what these things are. But in my opinion, my humble opinion, they all come from the same place. And in the first volume of his Antiquities of the Jews, the first century Jewish historian Josephus links the giants of Genesis to Greek demigods like Hercules. In later encounters between the giants and Israel, the outcome is always violent, leading to all-out warfare and brutal bloodshed between the two groups. It is this particular feature of the giants that yields us insight into what may have happened to them, not only in ancient Israel, but throughout the world. We're provided with a sort of explicit account regarding the fate of the pre-Diluvian giants, the pre-flood giants in extra-biblical literature. And the apocryphal book of Ecclesiasticus, which is included in the Catholic but not the Protestant canon of the Old Testament, we do find the following statement that the ancient giants who were destroyed for trusting in their own strength were not exonerated for their sins. Two things are suggested in this statement. First, that the ancient giants had extraordinary might and power. And secondly, that their destruction occurred because they relied way too heavily on this power. But the text does not state whether the giants killed each other off or were destroyed by their victims, finally rising up against them. Probably a combination of both. And I found some really crazy stories about how some of these giants were killed, some of the alleged ways that they were killed in battle against the Israelites. And it's very clear that just as God sent a fire tornado and parted the Red Sea, there's miracles that are not included in the Bible, guys. There's stories, there's entire eras that are just not included in the Bible in detail. And there are, texts that could accompany the Bible that explain and talk about some of these stories from those times that are not explicitly discussed in the Bible. One of those, it's taught in the Midrash that there were stones that remained suspended in the air, and they did not fall because of a man, and they also fell down because of a man, whatever that means. The Gemara explains they remained suspended because of a man, that is Moses, whom the verse refers to as a man, as it is written. And the man Moses was very modest. This is Numbers 12:3. And it's written, and Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread forth his hands unto the Lord. The thunders and hail ceased, and the rain was not poured upon the earth. Moses' hailstones remained suspended, and the stones descended because of a man. That is Joshua, who is also called man, as it is written, take Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is spirit. That's Numbers 27:18. And it is written that when Joshua and his people waged war against the army of the Amorite kings, God told them not to fear them because God would deliver them into his hands. And indeed, they died by means of these stones. It says, as they fled from before Israel, while they were at the descent of Beat Horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died. They were more who died with the hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew by sword. That's Joshua 10:11. Some of those less than canonical accounts talk about this Og, king of Bashan, who is allegedly the last of the giants. And it says, with regard to the rock that Og, king of Bashan, sought to throw upon Israel, there's no real biblical reference, but there is a tradition that was transmitted. The Gemara relates that Og said, how large is the camp of Israel? It is 3 parasangs. I will go up and uproot a mountain that long, and I will hurl it upon them and kill them. And he went, and he actually uprooted a mountain that long and brought it on his head. And the Holy One, blessed be he, brought grasshoppers upon it, and they pierced the peak of the mountain, and it fell on his neck. His teeth were extended to one side of his head, and to the other he was unable to remove it. And that is what is written. You break the teeth of the wicked. That's Psalm 3:8. And this is in accordance with some other Jewish texts and stuff from the Talmud. But I thought it was very interesting that we do have some stories where God sent bees, God sent ants, God sent locusts to help the Israelites kill these freaking giants. So there were miracles going on during this time. It wasn't simply open warfare. It was, but it was also quite literally the army of God in spiritual form taking on these beings. That's how much he hated them. Now, more insight into the question of the giants and their final fate can be found in turning to the Hebrew text of the Old Testament. In the Yahweh's flood account in Genesis 6, the author reportedly notes that because of the giants, the land was filled with violence. In Hebrew, the word for that is Hamas, coincidentally. As noted in Strong's Hebrew Dictionary, the term Hamas is often used in reference to self-destructive violence, meaning acts of physical violence directed not just at others, but ultimately towards oneself as well, and one's own dealings with members of their own community. In other words, Hamas is literally a self-consuming, almost suicidal type of violence, and it is associated with the giants. And that suggests that even before the actual flood event, they were in danger of extermination through killing each other off. We know they were cannibalistic. You guys may or may not have heard my theory about how cannibalism was possibly brought about by the Nephilim at first, that it is because of them that cannibalism even exists. One could even conclude, based on the use of Hamas in Genesis 6, that the giants were destroyed through some type of civil war. But I personally don't think that is the only way they were destroyed. I think there was a lot going on that was killing these things, because these things had also a desire to stay. They had a desire to rule mankind. They warred with each other, certainly, but they also used mankind to sustain power. Such an understanding of the fate of the giants would correspond well, this whole Civil War concept, with the archaeological evidence as well as a bunch of these oral traditions around the world dealing with giants, especially in North America, where we hear about these warring tribes. There was the red-haired giants, the black-haired giants, the pale-skinned giants. In the Midwestern region of the U.S., two pre-Columbian civilizations, the Hopewell and the Adena, seem to have mysteriously and quickly disappeared after what archaeologists infer was a sudden, massive battle between the two groups. And we also see the Anasazi people, who appeared to have been cannibalized to their extinction. And we just try to act like that didn't happen, but that is what the evidence suggests. And the Pueblo people of that region now still have stories about how you never talk about the Anasazi. You never go to their lands because they are cursed lands, because there were great spiritual beings on their side, in their camps, in their towns, and ultimately they were destroyed because of that. That stuff is crazy. The historical idea, according to people who don't like to believe in this stuff, for their extinction is that the Aztecs essentially raided northern for a little bit. They went to the north. It would be north for them, right? Because the Aztecs would be in what is Mexico now. But they raided north and essentially ate everybody and then went back. But to me, I don't know, there's a lot of Anasazi stories about spiritual beings, and it makes a little bit more sense to me that they were not just invaded by these cannibalistic Aztecs, but that they were basically eaten from within. But anyway, all of this parallels the type of self-destructive violence that is described in relation to the giants in the Old Testament. We see so many parallels that it's hard to ignore. It's almost like you could just take the story of the Bible and put it in North America sometimes. And I'm not saying that in the conspiratorial way that you might think. I'm just saying that it's crazy how the story repeats itself. But on the other hand, traditions also exist among various Native American tribes of a violent conflict that existed between their ancestors and ancient races of giants in North America, where the tribes had to come together and kill these things off. The Paiute Indians, for example, refer to an ancient race of hostile and violent giants known as the Siteka, and I'm sure you've heard of them. As in the biblical account, the giants oppressed these ancestors, who eventually rose up in revolt against them and exterminated them. Do you remember the giants of Lovelock Cave? That type stuff. We've talked about the Anasazi and how they would summon strange spiritual entities before, too. I'm sure you guys, I'm obsessed with the Anasazi people. I think the story is absolutely insane, and I go over and over it. But you know, they undoubtedly had a horrible end associated with them being consumed by each other or something else. And it wasn't just animals. It wasn't just famine. These ancient cultures that are not only in North America, but all of the world, called these beings gods and sons and daughters of gods, monstrous spiritual beings that almost wiped them out. And that kind of parallels the pre-flood idea. We've seen that the words sons of God actually refer to mutinous angels who abandoned their God and the posts that God assigned them in order to essentially engage in illicit sexual relations with mortal women. You know, the Genesis 6 account that we've beat over and over and over. And from those women, the giants were born, and these were fierce, mighty men of renown, as we've seen. Both Peter and Jude wrote convincingly by the Spirit about these events, expounding on how God dealt with those rebellious angels. And the Bible is clear about what was going on before the flood and how God felt about it. The scripture literally says, God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. And that's Genesis 6, 5 through 7. Great wickedness filled the earth, filled it to the brim, and every thought of people's hearts was evil continually. You know, we're sinners, but imagine no good ever. None ever. And even the animals were somehow committing sins. Constant violence, constant inbreeding with beasts and monsters and fallen spiritual entities, constant violence and wickedness. And this grieved God's heart, which in the original language means God was deeply hurt and vexed inside. It was out of this intense distress of soul that God chose to bring the flood to cleanse the earth of the infestation of giants, monstrous creatures, and all the wickedness that was rampant at that time among man and beast. Genesis 6:11 through 13 elaborates further. In addition to every thought and imagination of man being evil continually, the all-encompassing problems that plagued humanity. It says the earth was also corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. I love how he says, I will destroy them with the earth. That makes the earth feel so very alive, which makes me feel like God, not only are we special in his eyes, but the earth itself is very, very special to God. He doesn't want to destroy the earth. He's going to use the earth to destroy the Nephilim and their corrupt influence on the planet. The word corrupt appears in this passage 3 times, and in each case it's translated from an original word that depicts something that has been blemished, marred, or ruined. So it was perfect at one point, and it was ruined. It was corrupted. It not only refers to the spiritual rot that was in the world at that time, but also the literal blemishing and marring of the human gene pool that was occurring because of fallen angels engaging in sexual relations with earthly women, but also animal kind, and then mankind imitating this evil. There was just rampant inbreeding to the point where humanity essentially did not exist anymore. And it appears that there were almost no pure-blooded humans there anymore. And maybe there weren't even that many pure-blooded animals anymore when you think about it, because they all had to fit on a boat, right? It's not like God lifted them up into the sky and brought them to magic land before, I shouldn't even use that word, not magic land, but it's not like God just lifted them. I hate using the word magic. If I can avoid it, I try not to, and God is not magic, so that's why I make that correction there. But if he was lifting them into the air which is how, like the Hindu would tell their story or something like that, that would almost feel like it makes more sense than putting them on a big giant boat. Because look at all of animal kind. We're finding new species all the time. There's stuff popping up all the time. And you're telling me that just 2 of each one fit on the boat? First of all, it doesn't seem like the boat should be that big. Like, we know how big the boat is. It doesn't feel like it's big enough. But also, it was only Noah and his family that made it on, because only Noah and his family appeared uncorrupted. That's the way it seems to me. So we can go ahead and think about how, God said he hated all of animal kind, all of mankind, and there was very little left of what was actually pure. And it was Noah and 2 of each of these animals. What if that was pretty much all that was left of them? Of the actual pure-blooded beings as created by God and continued through the seed of Adam and the original intention for things. Through this angelic human mixture that was going on the earth, a pollution of human DNA was taking place, resulting in the birth of contaminated and, quite frankly, a twisted race of hybrid giants. That's what the texts say. But this was continuing. This was not a one-time thing. This continued for years. Some allege a similar kind of genetic contamination was taking place in the animal kingdom at the same time, as this new race of giants began to violate and defile the animals. Because they did. They sinned against every creature. I mean, this was a pandemic of evil. It was everywhere. It was widespread. And boy, does it bring to mind the whole COVID thing. And boy, does it bring to mind the whole mRNA thing that, challenges what the mark of the beast is and really fights with your DNA. They say it modifies your DNA in a way. It just, we're there, guys. We are very close to what I'm seeing in these times of Noah. It doesn't feel like we're far off. And this planet-wide defilement had become so pandemic in the days preceding the flood that all flesh had corrupted his way. The words all flesh show that the inclination of all humanity at that time was to participate in the evil that was taking place. But importantly, the words all flesh can also encompass the animal kingdom. And you can look into that in Genesis 7:15 and 16, as well as Genesis 8:17. But this is probably where a lot of cryptids came from. No lie. This is probably where a shit ton of cryptids came from, and might be why we still see cryptids today, as well as the post-flood corruption that also took place. These are probably, if they exist, and they're not just Nephilim masquerading in their skinwalker suits, these are probably some of the bastard beings that were created through this evil. The likely reason that people willingly engaged in wickedness was the celestial beings descended from the heavens, and it literally looked as if gods had come down from another dimension. I mean, it says in the end that many will be deceived because the Antichrist will come as Christ. Well, isn't that a lot like the days of Noah? People were mesmerized and enamored by these beings' presence. 2 Corinthians 11:14 says that Satan has the ability to transform himself into an angel of light. What was happening at that early moment in Earth's history was very dark, was very devious, very deceptive, and nearly completely successful. As those rebellious angels were entering the physical realm of Earth, they outwardly appeared as glorious celestial beings, angels of light. And you got to think about humanity at this time. They hadn't seen God. They were easy to corrupt. They were like babes. They didn't know what was happening. It seems the people were literally so dumbfounded by the angels' godlike presence that they opened their arms to welcome them and even began to worship them. And we see that starting again now with all this alien talk, all these beings coming from the sky, this 3-1 Atlas, all this, man, do not fall for it. Do not fall for it. There are no aliens coming to save you. There are no aliens coming to save you. I was thinking about it, and because I was really scared of this 3-1 Atlas stuff at first, I was nearing a panic attack. I'm not gonna lie, because I was looking at it and I was just getting so afraid for some reason. I just felt this profound fear. But then I was like, and it was rooted in confusion is what it was. But then I was like, I just felt inside me that I'll know when it's Christ returning. I won't question, because I will know. And I won't look upon it on a Instagram reel and be like, I wonder if that's Jesus coming to save us. I won't, because we will know. We will know. Our soul will cry out, and we will know. So don't be fooled by this alien bullshit. This is another tactic, just like they did in the days of Noah. Now, you guys have heard me talk about cannibalism before. One of the first post-flood laws that was established by God, if not the first post-flood law established by God, was the ban on blood consumption. From Eusebius to Josephus, ancient sources seem to agree that giants were murderous cannibals that not only ate other giants, but also ate human beings and drank human blood. And their followers did the same. Their human followers, their inbred bastard followers, their hybrid followers, they all did the same. So with this in mind, consider the first law God issued after the flood, which is found in Genesis 9, 3, and 4. The following is what God told Noah and his family and all who would be born after them. He said, "Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat." In other words, don't eat your own kind, because what? The life is in the blood. The life is in the blood. Of all the laws God could have issued just after Noah and his family exited the ark, it's no coincidence God's first law was a ban on cannibalism. This is why I think that this was purely a Nephilim invention. But later this same prohibition was repeated in the law of Moses, where it's written, "And whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, that eateth any manner of blood, I will set my face against that soul that eateth blood, and will cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood." That's Leviticus 17, 10, and 11. Without question, the eating of blood was one of the atrocities committed by the giants before the flood, and a contributing factor as to why God brought the flood upon the earth. God's command not to eat flesh with blood in it was the equivalent of him saying, "Listen up. Rule number 1 is that you're not drinking blood no more. We will not return to the carnage and chaos that has just been destroyed, that I just wiped out. Now and forevermore, leave behind drinking blood." Capiche? I wonder, what do you guys think of those, survivors that eat, resort to cannibalism to survive? Do you think that falls within the same category? Does God set his face against those? It's an interesting question to me, because In the days of Noah, I imagine a lot of people were eating blood to survive as well. They were committing cannibalism to survive as well. It wasn't all pleasure. It wasn't all madness. It was to stay alive because the giants were consuming everything. There was nothing left for them. So I wonder sometimes about, is it better to die than to break this law? Even if everybody around you is doing it to survive and you're needed or whatever, I don't know. It's an interesting question. Let's look at Amos 2, 9, and 10, where one group of Amorite giants is referenced. In these verses, the Bible says, "Yet destroyed I the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and he was strong as the oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above, and his roots from beneath." In this passage, God himself identifies a race of Amorite giants as being present after the flood, and states their height was as tall as cedars. Now, cedars are pretty hardy trees that grow like upwards of 100 feet or more, and they can have a trunk diameter of up to 10 feet. And God was here comparing these Amorite giants to these cedars. But in spite of their enormity, they were ultimately wiped out by the children of Israel. And we have Native American tales as well of beings that would run through the trees as tall as the pines, and the forest would shake as they ran through the trees. The presence of numerous tribes of giants is also confirmed in the book of Numbers, where we read that Moses sent the 12 spies to search out the land. And after 40 days, 10 of the spies returned from the promised land and gave a negative, fearful report based on the giants they saw in the land. And these are basically fake media. These are like the original fake media, these people here. They come back and they're basically like, we can't do this, bro. We can't take these guys. They're huge. They're massive. And it says they brought up an evil report of the land, which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, "The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." That's Numbers 13, 32, 33. But they weren't telling these spies weren't telling the Israelites this in a way that's like, we got this. They were saying, we can't do this. And this suggests that just as giants had insatiable appetites before the flood, giants likewise had insatiable appetites after the flood. It was kind of the same routine, the same song and dance. God was going to give people another chance, and they failed. These giants were back. They were still hungry. Now, ancient documents state that when the crops and meat produced by the labors of men were no longer satisfying to these giants, they would turn on each other, and then they would also turn against the people who literally were feeding them, cannibalistically eating their flesh and drinking their blood. These barbaric acts of the giants are documented by Eusebius and Clement of Alexandria, who are noted among Jewish and church historians as being very accurate in what they wrote. So we can assume that what they wrote about the cannibalistic behavior of the giants is kind of reliable, and it was after the flood as well. But notice the frequency with which the dreaded Anakim are mentioned in the book of Deuteronomy. There's several verses. Deuteronomy 1:28 says, "Whither shall we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying, the people is greater and taller than we. The cities are great and walled up to heaven, and moreover, we have seen the sons of Anakims there. The Amims dwelt therein in times past, a people great and many and tall as the Anakims, which also were accounted giants as the Anakims, but the Moabites called them Amims." That's Deuteronomy 2:10 and 11. And Deuteronomy 2:20 and 21, that the land of the Ammonites also was accounted a land of giants. Giants dwelt therein in old times, and the Ammonites called them Zamzumims, a people great and many and tall as the Anakims, but the Lord destroyed them before them, and they succeeded them and dwelt in their stead. Still, we have Deuteronomy 9, 1-3. Hear, O Israel, thou art to pass over Jordan this day, to go and to possess nations greater and mightier than thyself, cities great and fenced up to heaven, a people great and tall, the children of the Anakims, whom thou knowest, and of whom thou hast heard say, who can stand before the children of Anak? Understand therefore this day that the Lord thy God is he which goeth over before thee. As a consuming fire he shall destroy them, and he shall bring them down before thy face. So shalt thou drive them out and destroy them quickly, as the Lord hath said unto thee. Dang. I would like to believe that there's nothing I would fear if I heard that. And that's why I have faith in these end times. When I think yet again we will see the Nephilim rise. That is my whole point behind my Nephilim Agenda conversations that I frequently have here. In these passages, Moses addressed the nation of Israel and recalled 3 of the groups of giants they'd encountered since the Exodus from Egypt, along with mentioning the Amim and Zamzumim. Moses cited the Anakim 6 times and essentially stated that even though they were great in size, strength, and number, God had enabled the children of Israel to decimate them. We also find that Joshua, Moses' successor, referred to the Anakims. After the Israelites had cut off the Anakim giants from the cities of Hebron, Debir, Anab, and all the mountains of Judah, the Bible says that there was none of the Anakims left in the land of the children of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Goth, and in Ashdod there remained giants. And that's Joshua 11:22. Interesting. Only in Gaza, in Goth, or Gath, and in Ashdod they remained. So, what are we led to believe here? That the giants were completely killed off? Maybe they were. And that's why we don't see them anymore. But that does not mean, let's just say that that is the case. And that everything that we see that we call giants are not actually giants. There's something else. There comes some sort of bastard species of this era, or some sort of cryptid of other type, right? That doesn't mean that they won't return again. And if the Bible says it's going to be as in the days of Noah, I'm fairly certain they will be coming again. And that's one of the reasons that people are going to worship them, is because they're going to be giants, and they're going to be beings of light and immense power. Pretty creepy stuff, but at least we'll know who the bad guys are, because they'll be freaking huge. A careful study of the Old Testament reveals that there were numerous tribes of giants living throughout the Promised Land, also known as the land of Canaan. And these tribes of giants included the Amalekites, the Amorites, the Avim, the Canaanites, the Amim, the Girgashites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Horam, the Jebusites, the Cadmonites, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Perizzites, and the Zamzumim. Giants were real, y'all. They are explicitly talked about. We might not get all the gory details we want, but these things existed, or the Bible is a lie. Many battles and wars followed the flood, and they're still continuing to this day, but among them were battles and wars against giants, as we've seen. Evil did not completely die out with the flood because the mission had not yet been completed. We hadn't been redeemed. The explanation for the post-flood Nephilim is that essentially sons of God, distinct from those who initially, pre-flood, went to the daughters of humans before the flood, went to the daughters of humans born after the flood. In other words, they came back. More sons of God fell. more sons of God. There were multiple fallings, and maybe the falling is continuing still. So if these sons of God were fallen angels, then these fallen angels are in addition to the ones who were locked up in the abyss as a result of their having sexual relations with human females before the flood. So the abyss could contain two sets of fallen angels: those who had violated human women before the flood and those who had violated human women after the flood. Or maybe they're still out there in the White House or in the Vatican or in Antarctica. Who knows? If the sons of God were human males, this interpretation would imply that God had commanded the sons of Shem or Japheth not to have sexual relations with the daughters of Ham or Canaan. And the violation of this command evidently would have produced a second generation of Nephilim. So where did they go? Did they change form? Do they look different now? Are they more like us now? Are they harder to see now? Because their DNA has also sort of gotten weaker through time, as ours does. And so now, they are what we call NPCs. Some speculate that the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim still remain on the earth and became what we now refer to as demons. And the presumption is that as angelic human hybrids, the spirit of the Nephilim would have been different from the human soul spirit and have the ability to remain present in this world despite no longer having a physical body. And when we are experiencing mental disorders or afflictions, demonic possessions, serial killing tendency, all this kind of stuff, we're actually being influenced by these demons, these Nephilim spirits. This would possibly explain the desire that demons have to possess human beings in the first place. They want a physical body again. Deuteronomy 3:11 says, and this just kind of furthers my idea that maybe the giants were all killed off, and if we're seeing them now, we're seeing them again. Not that they have persisted through time, but that we are seeing them again. Because Deuteronomy 3:11 says, "For only Og, king of Bashan," the one who had the locusts drop the mountain on his head, essentially caused the mountain to drop on his head, only he remained of the remnant of the giants. A seed war started in Genesis 3:15, which says, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and hers. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." From the beginning, God had a plan in mind. He knew that he would send his son Jesus to the world to destroy the works of Satan passed down through this tainted generation. Genesis 6:1-4 talks about men multiplying on the earth and God limiting the years of men to 120 years. Troy Brewer, who's an excellent pastor, he talks about this, and he said it had to do with human beings getting so intimate with demonic things that they pass something down physically. He believes that this is still happening to this day, and I do too.
Whenever God Almighty told the Israelites to go into the promised land, if it was the Canaanites, he said, just push them out. If it was the Moabites, he said, pass them up, don't even bother them, because you know what? Their people took care of the giants, and y'all don't need to mess with them because they're trouble too, but they're trouble in a different kind of way. Just stay away from them. So some, he says, leave them alone. Some of them, he says, you know what? You can actually go in covenant with them. Most of them, he says, you can push them out. But if it comes to the sons of a Nephilim mix, he says, kill them. And then he also says, and he didn't in this case, which tells me that he had that they had stolen animals. But like in the cases of the Hittites, in a case of King Agag, whenever Saul was supposed to kill him and wipe them all out and all of their animals, it's because they had Nephilim sex magic that also went on with their animals. And they wanted to pollute the DNA of absolutely everything so that Christ could not be born. Now, whenever we come to the genealogy of King Jesus in the book of Matthew and also in the book of Luke, in the book of Matthew, it starts off with Adam and it goes from Adam all the way to King Jesus. King Jesus is the 77th bloodline. He's the 77th generation.
Another person who talks about this a lot is Timothy Alberino. In Brewer's sermon about this, the one that I'm referencing, he points to the flood and transhumanization. He says the tainted seed or bloodline was growing rapidly, and God had to bring the flood to wipe them out. Imagine Jesus coming back to a world that was filled with a mixed bloodline. This is why genealogy is important to God in the Bible. We see it over and over. You see the pure bloodline leading up to Jesus from the very beginning. He is not part Nephilim. He is not a Nephilim. He's not part fallen. He is pure of God. He says the reason God had all of the men, women, and children killed is to destroy the tainted DNA and bloodlines. When the Israelites went into the promised land, people are like, oh, God is so evil. How could he have everybody slaughtered, even the women and the children? It's because they weren't pure humans. They were a hybrid bastard race. They were a weird mixture of Nephilim, fallen angel, and human seed. They weren't supposed to ever exist. And Brewer points to these mixed seeds. And he says a DNA that God did not create was spreading in humanity. It's been going on from the very beginning. This whole transhuman agenda of the post-human that is like a nothing burger of humanity, it's been going on since the beginning, even in the days of Jesus. It's going on right now. We see it happening right this second. You have people like Bill Gates and the people in Palantir and all of that talking about how these mRNA vaccines allow them to see you beneath your skin because they're technology, guys. It's time to wake up to this. They're trying to prepare us for an age where we are immortal, where we are like gods, where we are nothing and everything all at once, but we will still be slaves to them, right? They're not going to give us all the power. It's a lie. They're going to cannibalize us. We're going to cannibalize each other, and people will wish for death, but it will not come. That's how bad it's going to get before Jesus decides to come back. We see all these talks today of transhuman conversations happening around the world. It's the idea that through AI tech, a mesh would happen between humanity and computers, which are the new gods. The gods of modern technology, as I've called them before. People are worshiping this tech. They're trying to overtake the role of God and creation. In the end times, we know that many will be deceived. There will be a great falling away. And as these conversations continue to sprout up, the most important thing at the end of the day is who your allegiance is to. And are you loyal to Jesus or the gods of the world? The Apostle Paul warned that humanity had changed the truth of God into a lie and worshipped and served the creature more than the creator. That's Romans 1:25. Romans is one of my favorite books. This, the argument goes, is the origin of global paganism. In Acts 19:24 through 35, silversmiths in Ephesus profited from shrines to Diana or Artemis, a goddess tied to fertility and the moon. Echoes of Nephilim mating rituals. When Paul preached against gods made with hands, the craftsmen rioted, fearing loss of trade. The town clerk defended the image which fell down from Jupiter, a meteorite idol. A meteorite idol. 3-1 Atlas comes to mind. But symbolically, it's a relic of fallen angelic power. This model, profit through pagan hero worship, finds modern expression in the comic book industry as well. Superman, Wonder Woman. It's all a Nephilim reboot, guys. Superman rocketed from a dying world, Krypton, which is this fallen angelic realm, raised by human parents, and embodies the Nephilim formula. Divine origin plus human upbringing equals superhuman savior. His S shield marks him as a man of renown. Wonder Woman, daughter of Zeus, trained among Amazon warriors, is a direct descendant of the Diana cult in Ephesus. Her lasso of truth and her bulletproof bracelets are modern talismans, replacing biblical armor with pagan symbols. You can read more about that in Ephesians 6:11 through 17. Marvel's Thor is the Norse god, literally. The Hulk channels Nephilim rage. Darkseid and Thanos are Titan-like tyrants. Captain Marvel's cosmic energy recalls Lucifer's fall as lightning. All as it was in the days of Noah. Jesus warned, as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be also in the days of the Son of Man. That's Luke 17:26. People ate, drank, married. They normalized the abnormal. Nephilim unions were commonplace. Today, superhero media normalizes God-human hybrids, transhuman enhancement, and moral relativism. They are trying to prepare us for what comes next, the transhuman. The flood came suddenly. So will the judgment. Luke 17:37 says, wheresoever the body is, thither will the eagles be gathered together. Thank you all for listening. The life is in the blood.